evening, everybody. Why don't we convene our work session for the Laramie City Council for November 9th, 2022. And we'll begin by going to, well, the order is work session, and then there's documents. So go ahead and access your documents, but we'll also go to public comments on non-agenda items, and city manager or the executive assistant. The arrangements we've made for public comment for this individual, is it on agenda or non-agenda? Because either way, I think we'll go ahead and allow for the comment now, given the circumstances.
Mayor, I believe it is on non-agenda items.
Okay, so public comments open, and we'll go ahead and take public comment.
Okay. So do you want to come over here? I'm just going to have let you speak into the speaker here. You can come on around. No, you can just walk over here. You can. Okay. So here, this is the speaker here. You can just show them on it.
Oh, okay.
If you want to put your head down a little bit.
Oh.
Hello, sir. Nancy, do you have any way to angle that camera maybe? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you. Welcome. We understand that you'd like to make public comment, sir.
Yeah.
I wear this because it's
okay. It's okay. Here. There you go. Okay.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. I apologize for all the confusion which I am creating because I live in the neighborhood north of the university, which is affected by all the parking problems. And one of the neighbors told me a few days ago that there was a work session of city council at 6 o'clock about the continuing parking problem, which has been going on since I bought my property in 1978. So I really appreciate everybody making this sort of time available for me. I'm not quite sure what the agenda or format of this is, but I have a number of comments, and I'll try to be brief. First of all, I own the property on Lewis Street across from the College of Education since April 1978. And that neighborhood of modest homes was mainly developed after World War II. There are homes there from before World War II, but the majority of the development took place after World War II. Now, if the university wanted to expand into that area, they blew away their chance because that neighborhood is built up now. They could have expanded that way before people had their homes there. Now, what I have my office in my home. It's not a home office. It's an office where I don't rent or buy a office in a different location. I've saved a lot of time and a lot of money by working where I live. I've done this since the 1960s. Now, when somebody blocked, when somebody blocks my driveway, I have to take off of work to deal with it. Just like anybody else has to take off work for a disturbance. And so I need to call the police dispatcher. And the officer may be out there in 5 or 10 minutes, or he or she may be out there in 20 or 30 minutes. But I have to be out there to explain the situation. Then the officer decides whether there is a violation of the two different ordinances. And so the officer decides whether to cite the violator or apparent violator, or to cite and tow. Now, if the officer decides to tow, I mostly stay there with the officer until the tow truck comes. And that involves maybe another 15 minutes, maybe another 3/4 of an hour. And I'm losing time for work over that. I'm not home staring at the boob tube. So I thought sometimes I should build a university. I'm sorry, I have to take a sip of water. This is water. I don't speak in public very well. So I've thought sometimes of building a university for the time I'm losing for work. Do you think how well that would go? If I go to small claims court and bill them for my time? So it's an extreme aggravation for people in this neighborhood, and people are not going to be driven out of their homes by this nuisance. Now, I'll say this: if you want to solve the parking problem, you can increase the city fees for violation of the parking ordinance above what the university charges, because people would rather block the driveways in a residential neighborhood, and even if they get a citation, then block a portion of the university property. Now, I can't give. I can leave this here. I have a note which I put on the windshield of vehicles which are blocking my driveway. And that avoids me having to call the police dispatcher, which would really waste the city's time and money and waste my time. Now, sometimes when I've had people towed away, and 5 minutes later, somebody's parking in the same place where I had a vehicle towed. I mean, this is, there is a legal doctrine of if a government entity creates such a disturbance that people are not able to use the quiet enjoyment of their home, that is an uncompensated taking. That is a form of eminent domain, which is an uncompensated taking. And how do you think a claim of that type would go? But if somebody, if a government entity does such a disturbance in a neighborhood that it's an uncompensated taking and that business loses money for it, then there is a monetary loss. But when a private citizen has a disturbance by a government entity in front of their own home, how is anybody supposed to calculate that monetary loss and be compensated for it? But anyway, I started to say that I have, and I'll leave these. I have copies of the note which I put on the windshield of vehicles that block my driveway, and I've gone out in the middle of winter and slipped and fallen, just putting on the ice, just putting these notes on people's windshields. Anyway, I have, you know, you cannot get along with these university people. Some of you may know Kelly and Gary Southard. I believe that Kelly Southard worked here in the city manager's office for some years. They owned the property. I'm giving you an example of how difficult it is to get along with the university. They owned a property at 563 North 14th Street. That's the block where the former UW credit union building is, that is now the University Police Station. They are elderly and retired, not as old as I am. I'm in my mid-80s. They did not want to sell to the university. And there was so much disturbance in the neighborhood and so much uncertainty and what was going to happen as far as university trying to seize their property by eminent domain, that they had a lot, I think I'm correct in this, they have a lot in West Laramie, and they intended to build on that lot. They entered into a contract with the university to convey their property on the 15th of June this year. But because of the various problems with workers and with materials, their house in West Laramie, I'm sorry, I'm so thirsty. This is water, I assure you. Their property was not ready to move in on June 15th. University told them they have to get out. University wouldn't pay any moving expenses. I mean, you're not going to read about this in the Boomerang. And people do not take their information of what goes on solely from university propaganda handouts. Okay, so the Southards were forced to rent temporary premises because the university needed their property on the 15th of June. They said they're going to clear this block. So university wouldn't pay any moving expenses. This is what they're dealing with these people. They wouldn't pay any moving expenses. The Southards had to move twice. They had to move into a temporary rental, and then they had to move a second time when their new home is finished. So you can go by that block. Had to clear the block, 15th of June, they have to be out of it. You can drive by there tomorrow in the daylight, and that house is still there. When is it? June, July, August, September, October, into November. More than 4 months later, they forced those people out of their home. And what kind of town is this where people have no heart? I'm sorry. I could go on. I could go on about the eminent domain thing. I'm sorry.
Sir, I can really appreciate the effort you've made to make the comments here. My only reminder at this juncture is that we don't allow for an unlimited time period. So I'd encourage you to continue to articulate your frustrations, but with an eye towards a conclusion for us here.
Right. Thank you. And I'd like to make a point, which is tangential but relevant. Among other things, I could say the whole eminent domain thing. I am in a position to stand up to the university if they attempt to do eminent domain on my property. Okay, now I went to several meetings of the City Planning Commission in 2019 before the COVID problems, and I was appalled that, I don't know how it is now, I was appalled that the executive secretary for the president, the former president of the university, was a member of the City Planning Commission, and she did not recuse herself when voting on matters related to the university. Now, I don't know what policy City Council has as far as people recusing themselves when a matter representing their interest comes up to vote. Now, it's different having a voice, but I don't have a voice. I don't have a vote at City Council. But when somebody votes the university's interest at City Council, I'm appalled. I'm appalled. I don't know what kind of policy you have as far as people recusing themselves. Does everybody, do you have a policy? Does everybody make the decision on their own behalf? I mean, this is something that seriously needs to be looked into because it affects the whole what's the word I want? Reputation of this town, to not only within the state, but to people in other parts of the country, that people who have interests which come before City Council do not recuse themselves. And I think this is something that needs to be studied and looked into and made a public policy that people can know where people stand. Now, I won't go on about eminent domain because the university people have lied about the eminent domain matter, and I have the documentary proof, right? But I appreciate. I'll close. I appreciate the time that you've given me, and I promise you, university wants my property. There's going to be a legal battle that this town won't forget.
Well, we want to thank you again for your effort and time to come and articulate these concerns to the City Council, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Certainly.
Thank you. I'll share this with the council. Oh.
Council, I think it was appropriate for us to extend a somewhat lengthier and somewhat out of order for agenda comment given circumstances, but we are going to continue with public comment on non-agenda items. And in the interest of fairness, should we have some extended comment on the work session when the time comes, we'll extend that same courtesy to other people, given the council, I'll call it elevated interest in this parking topic. So, public comment on non-agenda items, if there is any. Seeing none, we'll move on to the work session, council members. And we have City Manager Jordan.
Evening, Council. The work session tonight was requested by City Council, seems like just a couple of weeks ago. As you'll recall, you all had said we could conduct the work session after the first of the year, but I had recommended that if we were going to talk about the section of ordinance that provides for residential parking districts to be restricted, to allow parking by people living along and adjacent to those district areas, I had said I thought we should have the conversation started sooner versus later, simply because an ordinance change in this regard would need to be done some probably 5 to 6 months at least ahead of August, which is when we begin the annual renewal cycle for those parking permits. And so for that reason, we're here this evening and we have prepared for you a presentation to talk about the residential permit parking section of municipal code. At the end of that presentation, we also thought it would be timely to provide some information to you about some new signage that will be going into the downtown parking lots, only because it was about parking, but not actually what you requested. So that's our intention tonight, is to share that information with you. Nancy Oakland Potter is with me tonight, and as you all know, Nancy Oakland Potter in our office is the primary administrator of the residential permit parking program. And so Nancy's going to break up me. You won't have to listen to me all night. And she's going to walk you through the first part of the presentation. And I believe she also would like to accept questions, Mayor, as she goes through the presentation. So with that in mind, the clerk has the presentation, and I will turn it over to Nancy, and she can talk to you about the status of this program, and at the end, some recommendations that we would make from a staff perspective for maybe some modifications in the future if you are open to doing so.
Thank you, City Manager. The council never finds it a burden to listen to our city manager inform us about a topic, but it's nice to see Nancy OP here this evening. And Nancy, so you want us to just ask questions as you move through we usually end up doing that anyway, whether we should or not, but it sounds like you're okay to accept questions as you go through your presentation.
Honorable Mayor and the council members, yes. Anytime during the presentation, please feel free to ask me any questions that you may have. I think it's always good when it's fresh in your mind to kind of work through it. And we can also revert back if there's a slide where something comes up that you kind of like, all of a sudden it like ticked something off your box that you want to go back to and revisit, and we can certainly do that. So we'll just go through each slide. I'll field questions, and if there are no questions, then we'll move on to the next slide. So this first slide essentially just tells you that this has been, an ordinance since 1994, and that we're limiting the on-street parking to only those that are residing in forum districts, and that they have to display the appropriate permit. If you could move to the next slide.
Sorry, Nancy.
That's okay.
Here we go.
All right, and these are item points that really were the driving point in creating this residential permit parking program for the protection of children and pedestrians from harm, because as you get congestion and hazardous driving conditions, it can cause some issues with those that are maneuvering in the streets, going places and whatnot. It's also preservation of historic neighborhood characteristics. reduction of potential dangers from blockages of fire lanes, hydrants, and infrastructure. And we know that that's quite important. Elimination of obstacles for delivery of emergency service, again, another important service that the city offers. And limiting on-street parking to include just the local area residential parking owners and renters, which we know is, pretty condensed in that area. Provide area residents an increased opportunity to park closer to the home. I will tell you that when I do have people applying for the formation of a parking district, I tell them that it will not eliminate any issues. It can alleviate it. It will reduce the population and they might have more of an opportunity to park closer to their homes, but it will not guarantee them that. And then it's also to alleviate traffic and parking congestion. Any questions? Okay, next slide. So as we know throughout the years, as the university has been in existence, that they do continue to expand. And in looking at the parking construction information that they have on their website, we found it quite interesting that they are doing a number of construction projects that will affect the parking availability for students. In addition to that, so we're removing spaces, right? But we're also having more students come into the university. As their website indicated, they had grown by 10.2% this fall. It's the second year in a row that their incoming class has topped the previous year's enrollment. And so, those numbers are continuing to grow. Hopefully, the university does well, brings more people in here, but it's an issue that does definitely affect our available parking. Any other questions? If you can see, the University Transit Parking and Services said that the Ivinson parking garage, which is under construction at 10th and Ivinson, is going to open, but not until spring of 2023. However, if you look at the next upcoming slide, we have, I believe it is 4 parking lots that are available that will be closed due to various, renovations, constructions, or just elimination of that available parking. Any questions? Next slide. So what happens then as we get the university encroaching more into these neighborhoods? We have removal of, parking spaces. We have people that are being affected because university students, of course, want to get as close as they can to the university to get to their classes. And we have residents that are coming to us because someone has parked so close that their car is hung over and blocked their driveway. Just as that gentleman that was just here talked about people blocking their driveway. It happens. It happens quite frequently. And they do try to squeeze in. These parking spaces are precious and few, and everybody is, clamoring for them, and including the residents. It's the people coming in, going to class, visiting the university, or working there that, are fighting for these, just limited number of parking spaces. And as the university grows, we get more people into the population, fighting more and more for those, limited number of spaces. And one of the things that I pointed out to Janine is that when we do have like these parking districts created, and when you look at a block on our GIS map or even just on Google, that these aren't just like straight line parking availability. They're broken up by alleys, they're broken up by driveways, they're broken up by apartment complex parking that is like an extended driveway. So you're really reduced down to the number of parking spaces that are available for these residents who don't have off-street parking and have to park on-street and compete with the, university population. And as you can see, this it tells you the number of vehicles that are registered in the county. And as you can see, from 20 to 21, we've had an increase in the number of registered vehicles. And so far this year in 22, we still had like a couple months left. That number is also showing pretty healthy registrations. So more vehicles, more people, same number of parking spots, sometimes less if the university is taking up some of these spaces and utilizing them for their purposes. Any questions? Next slide. So when we talk about violations, we get, so that we have a limited number of staff on our PD force that can go out and, check and make sure that people are parking according to ordinance. But I would say we do get a great number of them actually being called in by residents, such as, like I said, the gentleman that was here, and other residents that have called me because they are blocked in, or cars have, well, I had another gentleman that called, even like parking and blocking their alleyways behind the house and in front of their homes. And just as other people, they have to take the time to wait for the police to respond, and in the meantime they can't get anywhere. They're blocked in, and it's a frequent occurrence. We get calls, I tell them to contact dispatch, and again they have to take that time for resolution to those incidences. Any questions? I will point out that top right hand corner picture with the pickup in that vehicle, that is an actual picture of one of those blocking type incidences for the residents. Next slide. So our residential parking program is well utilized. Since 2020, we've had no dissolution of any parking districts. And in fact, we've had an increased number of them. As you can see, 21, we had one, and then an exemption implemented. Exemptions will be like reverse corner implementation of that parking district. Just whatever special situations that we receive a call and they want to have like a parking district included in an area that isn't, where it's already formed. There's like houses that kind of wrap around, things like that. So far this year in 22, we've had 2 formed, and I also have 2, actually one is in the process of going through the application process, and I just received another inquiry today for forming a new parking district. Any questions? No? Oh.
It doesn't look like it. I think there's a little background noise there, but I don't think
okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing somebody. Back on that other slide, I will also say that where there was like a full street that was on Bradley between 11th and 12th, that was a formed parking district, and the university came and they purchased 3 of the 4 homes that were on there, and wanted to have the parking removed from in front of the entire street, but we had to work with the owner that still had their private residence there to ensure whether they wanted to be part of that removal or keep it maintained, and they did want to keep it in front of their home because again it just does kind of remove that population of people that get into those spots. It's only for those people that have a resident parking permit. Next screen. So not only do we have residents that are living in the, residential areas, we do have businesses that people that work out of their homes, and I have patrons that come in. And so we work with them to provide them some parking permits so that their patrons can park and come into their businesses. We also have disabled residents who are unable to park to their home in front of their home. And so then we have to work with them to go through the processes of modification of parking. When they go through that process, I can have the temporary space installed to help accommodate them. But that we have had quite a few of those inquiries as well. And in areas that currently don't have like a district formed, people are calling because they're like, I'm disabled, I can't park in front of my home. And if they don't have an established district, then we kind of go through the process of installing a disabled parking space in front of their home to help them with those types of situations. They're concerned about the enforcement efforts, whether they're insufficient or too aggressive. We work with the PD quite frequently and try to ask them if they can, patrol the area a little bit if we're getting a lot of calls in a certain area, or whatever issues that are coming up. We just collaborate with them as we need. And then there's abuses of the parking privileges, which we have tried to stave down by minimizing the opportunity for people to fraudulently create their own parking permits. So we make sure that they're changed. We have stamps, we have different things that we do with them. And each time that they're changed, which is in 6-month increments, the PD, the lieutenants, our other patrol officers are all notified, given copies of what these permits look like. And we just want to make sure that that these permits are only in the hands of those that are really supposed to have them. Any other questions? Next slide. So we've had reports of like misuse of the visitor passes. And so we've taken those, we've given them to the information to our PD. The residents who live in those districts, those farm districts, can purchase, I believe it's like 6 permits for $1. So it's pretty cheap, and it can be a lucrative opportunity for them if they were to potentially misuse them. So we've had reports of that. In the past 5 to 7 years, there has been a problem with the increased parking by UW contractors and subcontractors, because that's part of the issue that we're working on, is that with everything that's going on in the university, all the building, the moving out, the, everything that they're doing that is causing these issues within the community and putting strains on the parking issues. We just don't cater to providing those service permits. Service permits are strictly for people who are providing services, temporary services to our residents. And that can be home deliveries, health visits, some construction work on private homes, etc. And that those temporary service permits are strictly for those service providers. And I incorporated, when I came in, the inclusion of having vehicle information tied to that specific permit, which has helped with the PD in working with any misuse of those permits. And as it's noted, they're valid for 6-month period, in that February 1st to July 31st and August 1st to January 31st. And just to kind of keep from any overlapping, we have those specific deadlines. And people, without fail, do call and renew their permits because they are continuing those services for people that are important to our community and for their businesses. As I mentioned, that their driver information, their vehicle information is included on it, which, as I mentioned, was and has been even recently useful for our courts when addressing those violations and citations that were issued. Again, we just use new colors and different ways for the PD to easily and readily make sure that those temporary service permits are valid. And as you can see, we do get quite a good number of them that are issued. We really haven't had a whole lot of difference in the number that were issued during those time frames. So it's remained pretty steady over the years. Any questions? Next slide. So this is the complete view of the sectors, sector 1, 2, and 3. In the upper top, coming up, we have a suggestion for expanding out area for in sector 3, just to kind of hopefully as an option for just easing up the parking issues. As you can see, sector 3 is pretty well built up with districts, and so as we're going to recommend that expansion, it may just create a little bit of ease for those people who have those parking districts. But as you can see in looking in each of the sectors, the districts that are formed are the ones closest to the university, because those are the people who are feeling a lot of the pinch when trying to park in front of their homes and be able to carry their groceries within a reasonable distance. Any questions? Next slide. So when we talk about the misuse of those visitor parking passes, we're kind of asking that you consider requiring visitor parking passes to be addressee specific, and possibly incorporate a fine or revocation of the residents' visitor parking pass privileges. I know that they purchase them, it's at a pittance, but possibly, removing them or giving them a fine could help alleviate that issue. As I mentioned, it could be a pretty lucrative opportunity for them when they're getting 6 of them and they're paying $1. I don't know how much they're selling them for, but it's a little bit more money in their pocket, an opportunity. Addressing the district hopping, reducing the size of sectors 1 and 2 at regular intervals, helping to eliminate the hop districts by driving a few blocks from home in order to get a little bit closer to campus. So as you can see, there are some districts that are formed a little bit further away from the university. And so people who are issued a permit in sector 1 will take and drive up a few blocks to get closer to the university, more convenient parking. And they can do that. They can do that because they are issued a parking permit for that sector. There have been a lot of complaints about that, I will say. Sector 3, as we talked about, is very heavily developed with districts. And so we're talking about having it, expanded out. It has naturally evolved into a 2-block area and has, and like I said, it is very effective because people are utilizing that district to hopefully alleviate some of that fight for a parking space. We're asking you in that parking sector 3 to just kind of move that boundary northward to Harney Street as indicated in that map. To address the youth continued expansion of the campus, we could move away from fixed boundaries and instead create flexible sector boundaries that will adjust in real time. That way, it kind of eliminates and takes off of your plate us having to revisit and make ordinance changes, et cetera. It just gives us an opportunity to kind of grow and expand and let those areas work with what is going on the campus. So as the campus moves, the boundaries can move and we can help in real time just get it taken care of. We've had some suggestions from residents that they be address specific and allow a restricted number of issues of permits to be issued per household. However, the administration enforcement burden of that program would be significant because it would require routine enforcement and patrolling of those areas. And as we know that we're a little bit stretched out in our staffing right now in the PD for that type of enforcement. Any questions? Next slide. And this is where Janine will be taking over to discuss the downtown parking. But last chance, if you have any questions about any of the other information that was presented for the residential parking.
Doesn't look like it, Nancy, but I'm going to ask you, which of course you will, I know, just go ahead and stick around as questions may percolate up as we go along in the discussion. Thank you very much for that review about that. That was good.
Thank you.
City Manager.
Mayor, hearing no questions, this next piece won't take very long. Council, we're very close to the end. Todd Caesar, our Assistant City Manager, prepared the following slides for us, and I am pinch hitting for him tonight because he thankfully is getting some time away from the office, which is well deserved. So next slide, clerk. So, Council, you are aware that the city maintains a handful of parking lots, largely in the downtown area or near to the downtown. We have maintained these parking lots, most of them owned on the surface by Union Pacific Railroad and leased to the city and maintained by the city for decades, frankly. We, in our maintenance and management responsibility for those lots, periodically make changes. And we will do that in response to what's really happening in the lots. And many of you aware of some of the concerns that have arisen in recent years, probably over the last 2 or 3 years. We've had a growing and accruing concern with vehicles being parked for a very long period of time in these lots. And of course, these lots are maintained by the city to facilitate business transactions in the downtown. So for customers and patrons and employees of downtown businesses to park in. And so the intention of the lots has always been that there's a healthy turnover rate and that the parking lots don't become a site for effectively equipment or vehicle storage long term for either businesses, for residents, or for anyone for that matter. So we wanted to share with you, Todd has suggested sharing some of the new signage that we've worked up that we have in progress and will be installing to better articulate the needs in these lots and the expectations that the city and the downtown business community have. And so, for instance, this is the First and University parking lot. There's an aerial there kind of showing you where that's at and what it looks like. The new signs have been a collaboration between the police department, the city attorney's office, and my office, as well as the street department. This will be more clear, this signage, to say that, one, if you park here, you're consenting to the time limitations. Also, I don't know if Nancy can maybe zoom in at all on that slide, but what it says is no long-term parking, no vehicle storage. There we go. Thank you, Nancy. Is that more readable for you, counselors? I think I can read it now. Very good. I'm glad I'm not the only blind one. So, you know, the standard use at your own risk, no more than 24-hour parking, no camping, no soliciting, littering, loitering, no trailers, vehicles over 24 feet, and no storage of vehicles our non-motorized vehicles. And that's an issue because we often see people storing like trailers, cargo trailers, flatbed trailers, things like that. And so we've had over the last few years to keep those parking lots clear. Probably a couple times a year we go in and do a sort of mass enforcement, notice people, ask them to remove those vehicles. Fortunately, they're most often removed and not end up having to be towed by us. So these signs are being prepared for that lot. And then if you go to the next, Nancy, we'll look at the next lot, which is at 4th and University. And there's kind of the scroll in, similar signage. And as you know, the 4th and University lot, counselors, is a little bit further outside of the downtown. Probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, this lot was actually reserved only to city staff and employees and equipment. I can't even tell you when, but at some point in time, I made the decision to remove that restriction and allow for public parking in this lot. While it's not exactly in the downtown, it's certainly a very walkable distance to 3rd and 2nd Street and 1st Street. So we do see a lot of public parking going on in this lot now, and we have had issues recently over the last 2-3 years. Same with the 1st and University lot, with people parking RVs and trailers and just leaving them there forever. We even have had issues with people trying to use it as a camping location as well for living in those RVs. So this signage would be going up there in the near future. You'll note the only difference with this sign is we do exempt city fleet. For instance, if we wanted to store as a municipality a flatbed trailer in there, we could do so. Next slide. Next slide will move us more into the downtown heart or core to the 1st and Garfield parking lot. Again, same signage really going in there. The only difference with this sign is we are making a notation unless otherwise indicated, because there are some parking spots in that lot that are special. They're frankly leased by a private entity and are exempt from these rules for the general publicly provided parking spaces for general public. And that, fortunately, is, I think, an older picture of that lot. It's been restriped and looks a lot more attractive these days. Next slide. Lastly, we have the Hollyhock lot and then the Depot lot, kind of kitty corner from that, and the standard signage going in there with no exception, for city vehicles or for privately owned parking space. And I think that's the last slide, if I remember right. Yep. I think Todd was trying to show us here some potential for some decorative signage that won't be so regulatory in nature, but will accompany across the street the regulatory signage, and then he's showed us where he'd like to put a more attractive sign that would not just have rules, but in fact welcome people into our public parking lot and make sure that they're aware they can park there within the restrictions. And that's all I have. Any questions on those downtown parking lot signs?
It looks like we have questions bubbling up, City Manager. Thank you also for that last part of the presentation there, and we'll get into the discussion now. I've got Councilmember Harrington, followed by Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Harrington.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Janine, I had just maybe 2 thoughts. We'll see. I'm going to start with one and see if the second one turns into something when we get there. The first thought is maybe modifying the time allowance based on like specific to lots. And I know making sort of like micro changes like that does complicate enforcement and complicate sort of user understanding, I guess. But it occurs to me that the 1st and University lot and maybe that previously city-owned lot on 4th and University may be used in sort of a different fashion than the what would that be, the 1st and Garfield lot, Depot lot, and Hollyhock lot. You know, those 3 that are closer to the core of downtown, it makes a lot of sense to have a 24-hour limit. I'm just curious if, in sticking with our interest as a council in folks using other forms of transportation, if you were to live downtown, you may need to park and leave your car. It may be like sort of normal for you to not drive for a couple days. You know, I think that the issue isn't with somebody being parked in First and University lot for 2 days, 48 hours, whatever that threshold we determine is. To me, it seems like it's people who have several vehicles and 4 of them are parked in that lot and they haven't moved in 6 months. Or, when we had this conversation about the First and University lot and received some public comment, I went down and looked, and one car specifically had maybe 3 tickets that were like sun bleached and you couldn't read them anymore because the car had sat there for so long. So storage vehicle seems like the issue, maybe not so much like a 24-hour turnover. So I don't know what the solution to that is, but that would be maybe my bit of feedback on that. I think the 24-hour limit for those core lots makes sense, but those university lots I think could have a bit more flexibility on time to allow folks that live downtown a little bit more opportunity to park somewhere where they're not going to be towed if they decide to ride their bike to campus that day instead of move their vehicle. And then I think the other thing that I would be curious about, so this would be that second thought, I think it coalesced a little as I was talking, would be including some like very specific on-street parking in this. And I would reference, maybe just to be very specific about it, the on-street parking that is next to basically the entire length of the depot park. I've been photographing as I walk. I just take pictures to make sure cars have moved. There was one car there that hasn't moved since May. And it's a very notable vehicle. I have had some complaints about that, about businesses that are adjacent having some issues with cars not moving and other businesses sort of using that as storage. And so I would like the council to consider that as a part of this as well, about limiting the length of time a car can be sort of just stored next to our park. I think that limits some opportunity for economic activity as well. So that's really all I have. Not really any questions, just some feedback.
I could provide a little information on that, Mayor, if now's a good time, or I can wait.
No, that's fine. We'll go ahead and just kind of do questions and answers point by point. I think Councilmember Schuster's okay with that.
Okay. With respect to maybe more kind of longer parking beyond 24 hours, Councilor Harrington and councilors, I certainly recognize, in my entire office, all city staff recognize that we have people living in the downtown area whose rental agreement does not provide any off-street parking for them. And so I've had some dialogue through my staff. Actually, this issue came up probably about 6 weeks ago, and I was headed off to the city management conference. So Nancy and Todd helped me out with this, reached out to one of the downtown landlords, Mr. Glass, and they may have spoken with some other people and met with them while I was away. But the direction that I had given was, I think from the city standpoint, particularly with the law at 4th and University, as I said, I took away the public parking restriction for that years ago. It just seemed silly to me to have parking unutilized. But even with public parking in there and a 24-hour limit, the law is not full. And so what I had asked them to follow up with Mr. Glass and maybe others, I'm not sure who all they were able to speak with, was do we work out some partnership, frankly, with downtown landlords who do not provide any parking for their tenants. We know their tenants really can't, nor do we probably want them parking on the street and taking up parking for businesses, particularly those retail and restaurant businesses that need turnover of parking. 4th and University seems to me like a potential where we could partner with landlords who have properties downtown. We need to do some research on that, though. We need to know that maybe we can create some kind of permitting or long-term storage, long-term parking program that the landlord and their tenants will be responsible for, that the taxpayers won't be left sort of holding the bag, literally, figuratively, for removing unsightly, broken down, leaking, polluting vehicles that maybe get abandoned there. But there's certainly a way that that can be done. It's done all over the country all the time. It just requires the will of the private owners and then also the city. Fourth and University, to me, Councilor Harrington is primed for that. There may be other lots that are more outside of the downtown core that we could look at, and I think myself, Todd, and Nancy, we all agree there's potential to find a program that works for everybody. First and University, I guess I would ask for the council, for you all to think about that. If you'd like us to open that lot up to long-term storage of vehicles, we can. I would suggest, though, that we want to visit with our downtown business community, because while many of our businesses are more focused between Ivinson and, say, Garfield, there is a cadre of businesses on that north end of downtown that I think do rely on that lot. So I would recommend we talk with the business community and see about the utilization of First and University to serve patrons of the downtown. And I hear you on street adjacent to Depot Lot. As you know, there is a ordinance, counselors, that says if you are not the owner of the property adjacent to the property line and you park beyond 24 hours along somebody else's property, that property owner can call and ask for your vehicle to be ticketed or removed. So because Depot Lot is under the responsibility of the city, we do periodically make a sweep through there to see if we have long-term troublesome vehicles that have been there for 6 months, as in your example, Councilor Harrington. It sounds like we need to make a sweep through there as the owner, so to speak, or the responsible party for the property line, and take a look at that.
I've got a follow-up from Councilmember Harrington on this question, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councilor Schuster, thanks for letting me hold some time here. So Janine, I just wanted to be really clear. I'm not necessarily thinking we use First and University for long-term storage. I was just considering maybe, I like the idea, I should say, of Fourth and University functioning in that way. I think that's really smart. First and University feels like an active lot that should be used as an active in the core of our downtown lot, just maybe with a slightly longer period of time. So as an example, I would leave this to the police department and your office, but I think, in my mind, I had envisioned it as like 24 hours throughout downtown, 48 hours in that lot. If you want to have some longer term, sort of like you have a spot reserved, that doesn't make sense to me in that lot. Maybe it's just not big enough and is full often. So just to
I appreciate the clarification.
That.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Schuster, thanks for waiting.
I was thinking about talking about this on the last one when we were talking about parking around UW. But being on council as long as I have, being in Laramie as long as I have, we had a former UW president, President Dubois, that says the university doesn't have a parking problem. The city of Laramie does. And I see you smiling, so you might have been on council when he said that, because I really, really took offense to that. And right now, the university says, oh no, we've interviewed our students and they say there's no parking problem around the university. I thought, wow, they are not. They even said that ASUW misspoke when they said there was a parking issue and they weren't happy about losing the union. And then we had the meeting 2 days after that at the UW property, and they said they never talked to us. So it's just kind of funny. Everybody can say what they want to, but you get down to it, we have a parking problem probably within a 4-block ring around the university. And my parents used to live on Canby, and I'm glad they don't live there anymore, because I've driven to go see friends that lived in that neighborhood, and it's all the way to Canby. They were, our Nancy Oakland Potter said that they might want to consider expanding it to Harney. No, you need to expand it to probably Canby and maybe further than that, because it is becoming a really bad problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Okay, broadening the question out to the larger presentation and the issues. Other comments and questions now. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I think Councilor Schuster hit the nail on the head. The university basically refuses to admit that they've created some of the issues. And we all know that, we're living in Wyoming and people don't want to walk. They're not very fond this. UW is charging pretty ridiculous prices for staff and faculty to actually pay to park. I mean, I think it's pretty ridiculous the rates that they're asking from us, but you know, that's here nor there. They're gonna use their business model and be, you know, perfectly fine with their parking situation. I think as a community, as a city council, this is soon to be starting my 11th year on council, and the parking issue doesn't go away. I mean, it absolutely doesn't go away. So I would challenge staff, frankly, to come up with something else. I mean, and I understand we are very shy on resources, and we're shy on a lot of things, but there's got to be a different answer or a different approach to the problems that we're facing, to the problems that this community has been, frankly, putting up with for far too long. So I really would encourage, you know, something's got to give, because people are upset and have been upset for, you know, at least the decade that I've been on council. So, you know, if we need to institute some sort of metering to maybe come up with some, you know, a revenue stream. I know we worked hard on the rental to have some sort of revenue stream. You know, maybe we need to see if we can't facilitate, you know, different revenue, potentially ticketing, you know, or more ticketing, more enforcement. I don't know, but like I said, something's got to give with all of this, and it's really our responsibility. There are, you know, they're the community streets. Frustrations are high, have been high, and I would just challenge folks to, you know, city staff to come up with potentially a different plan. So thanks.
Next up, we have Councilmember Cumby, I believe, and then Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was interested in what the city manager said about the depot parking, that there were some parking spots that were leased out. And so those are reserved parking, you know, for whatever entity. And each parking lot that we have incurs a fee to the city, i.e. the taxpayers of our community. And there's costs for upkeep, for lighting, for snow removal, for monitoring, etc. And I just wonder about the feasibility of issuing parking permits that would come with a fee. And there would be a fee for parking more longer term in a city parking lot. So I've been in other cities when I was in graduate school, around a university, where there were residential districts where you could not park, and it was just accepted that you had to pay for parking. And I did that during that 5-year period. So I just think we need to think about what might work for residents in the form possibly of a permit that would allow them a little extended time or some other kind of compensation. So thank you.
All right, next up we have Councilmember Schmeckel. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, I'm on some hotel Wi-Fi that's very limited bandwidth going up. So if I break up, please speak up.
The audio is good, Councilor. So
excellent, thank you. Looking at the university situation, where the city of Laramie owns the streets, and I'm thinking of 9th Street there, just near Lewis, just south of Lewis, on the east side, there is an extended yellow curb period. I don't know why it's there. And I was kind of hoping that maybe Brooks would be on here this evening because maybe he would know. But I'm curious why there's an extended yellow paint period there that has eliminated a significant amount of parking in an area where we've eliminated other parking by vacating Lewis Street and just pushing the problem out a few areas. I'm curious what the story behind that is, and also to build off of Councilmember Pierce's comments about a revenue stream. You know, we have an asset that is Ivanson. Why wouldn't we turn that into like a one-lane, one-way street with a significant bike lane and some diagonal parking? Maybe with some meters on there to create a revenue stream or something like that. Not entirely certain. So, but those are my questions.
Mayor, if I could follow up a little more detail on Lewis, is that okay?
Yes.
Councilor Schmeckel, is the yellow that you're referring to, is it from a corner, backward, away from the corner?
It is from a corner backwards through several parking places.
Yeah, so I can say with great certainty that that is a sightline delineation at the corner of the intersection to allow for appropriate sight distances across opposing traffic. We often have parking spaces removed or yellow striping from the corner of a street backward, and I can't off the top of my head think of the standard distance, but that is a standard distance set by engineering standards, so that as those cross-traffic vehicles approach one another, or at a stop sign as a vehicle stops and then tries to enter an intersection, that they have adequate distance that they can see in order to enter the intersection safely.
Janine, if I might just add, it's the entire block from 9th and Lewis to Flint. The entire block is yellow, is what Fred's talking about.
Councilor Schmeckel, did you have? Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. Thank you. Councilor Schmeckel, did you have some follow-up to that? I see you still got a hand, so I want to make sure.
Yeah, my thought was that maybe this is something we check out in person here next time to get some folks out, just to make sure.
I'd be happy to have staff take a look at that.
All right. Councilmember Schuster, I'll go to you after I check for anybody else for first time on this one. Councilor Schuster, I've got a couple comments I want to add for my first time on this. And just speaking to the general issue, I just really agree with and will not surprise anybody with my agreement with the previous comments. I feel, having been a longtime Laramie resident myself, and certainly agree with the Vice Mayor the entire time that I've been on council, either time, that this has been a very serious issue that our residents are constantly irritated about, and frankly, to the point of almost feeling hopeless about with the UW parking situation. I think it's been asserted time and time again that there's no parking problem, which is just clearly not accurate. I attended a presentation in 2019 where it was once again asserted that there is not a parking issue. And in my view, this occurs because there's a study done, and it uses a methodology in which every single space of parking on the entirety of campus throughout Laramie is factored in. Of course, many of those spots are well outside the core campus areas of the Union, the classroom building, A&S, the new STEM buildings. I raised that exact point with the representative of the firm contracted by UW for the parking study, and they admitted that is in fact the case in the public meeting. That's not an accurate picture. That does not address the parking issue for the people that live around the core campus that we saw on the map and that we hear from so often. And I think the part that gets difficult about this for me, and where I differ with some of the comments that were made, is given the issues of unregulated towing and unregulated fees for towing and storage that can come with repeated parking problems and an increased enforcement approach, I'm really uncomfortable with a punitive course of action that penalizes people who are trying to find a reasonable place to park. And anecdotally, I'll share with you an experience from, it's probably 12 years ago or longer now, but I remember a lot of students had something to say about this. You know, there was some pretty severe below zero weather, and I remember at the time the immense pride, it seemed, that the UW administrators took in not closing the campus Now, it's true that perhaps that view has changed, and the folks making those kinds of calls may have a different perspective. But I also think you have to factor in some of the January, February weather, March weather, sometimes even that we deal with, and why people are probably going to want to park as close to where they need to go on campus as possible. I will acknowledge that I do believe that the park and ride bus system can help alleviate that and has helped alleviate that, but it's limited. And my thoughts always go to the number of students that live in West Laramie looking for more affordability in their apartment rental and home rental choices. They are not going to be utilizing the park and ride. They may drive all the way over from West Laramie to park in the East Side Park and Ride and then go in, possibly, but even that isn't going to provide enough space to deal with all of the parking issues. Yes, there are parking issues. And I will never take seriously any answer that says there aren't any. There are parking issues that are frankly put upon Laramie residents, and then they come to us to try to deal with it. And it's difficult for us to find solutions given I feel some of the things that we've heard over the years. There's a high demand parking area. The residents there are upset about the fact that they live in a high demand parking area. Folks that need to do business on the campus and students and otherwise have good reason to want to try to park as close as possible, possibly can't use the park and ride systems for a variety of reasons. They may have to work, their schedules may not coincide with that. They may have just enough time to get from where they need to go to park as close to campus as they can to get to class or whatever else it is. It's a complicated issue. There is a parking problem. And I don't think any member of this council or a future member of this council should really take seriously any view that says there isn't a parking problem. I also want to echo, I really agree with the comments about the costs of parking permits. That's not realistic either. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you for the second time. I think there was some confusing information on the railroad depot lot, and I just wanted to make sure people understood it. The ones that are reserved lots are behind basically Altitudes and next to Coal Creek Coffee. That parking lot there is half owned by Railroad Union Pacific and half owned by private businesses downtown. And that's why they have the right to reserve some of those spots for particular business people. And that's one thing a lot of people don't understand. The wildest one people don't understand is that street in front of the old historic railroad depot building is owned by Union Pacific. That's not even a city street. We rent that street. And I just think it's hilarious on some of those things that people say, well, it's your street, isn't it? I said, no, actually, it's not our street where people are parking there. The parking lots are not the city's parking lots, but the city leases them and has control of them. So it gets pretty confusing down on that corner of there. And I was wondering if Councilor Schmuckel was thinking about the brand new building that's at 9th and Lewis, because they did a curb out. So all the parking that would normally be against that building was removed, and they put in more landscaping and a bigger sidewalk down there too. So I just kind of wondered if those two things were ones they were talking about. But I know this site plan that City Manager Jordan was talking about is anytime a stoplight was removed, and that's what happened at 9th and Lewis, is we removed a stoplight. So then all of a sudden the site plan has to go out there. And yes, there is a lot of yellow paint there. Thank you. Just doing updates if I can help.
Councilmember Schuster, I think it's probably also worth pointing out when you talk about that, the city of Laramie is also responsible for ongoing maintenance and has been for several years of all of those as well. Really, the entirety of the management, control, and maintenance of that is the city of Laramie's responsibility. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councilor Schuster. I actually didn't know that about the street in front of the depot. It's interesting to know. But my comment was maybe going to be by way of, in Nancy OP's presentation, some request for feedback from the council. So the first thing I would say is I do think expanding northward on, we received a handful of public comments on this in our emails. They were all north of campus. So I do think expanding that section makes sense. Though I would be cognizant of expanding too far, because then you see the people from Canby Street, maybe, as the example was, driving to Bradley, maybe, or Lewis to get a little bit closer. And then, Mr. Mayor, taking your comment into consideration, I would also say that while folks would want to drive and park as close to campus as they can, by and large, those days where, you know, the -40 day, I think the first year I lived in Laramie, it was like -47. And I had a roommate show up with like ice eyelashes from riding their bike to campus. But I think we should consider as a city how we can better and maybe more safely allow people to ride their bicycles from where they live, or whatever transportation they choose from where they live to where they're going. So largely that would be to these population centers of downtown, or activity centers, and the university. May also be the rec center, may also be you know, the high school, middle school, places like that. You know, I think we can't expect to follow the bicycles. We can't, you know, we're not going to see a bunch of multimodal users until it is safe and really kind of accessible to do so. So, you know, I think in a lot of ways it is, it feels chicken and the egg, but I don't think that it is. I think it would take our investment first before we see the use of that. You know, and I would say that there is a considerable effort being put into e-bikes as an option for replacing short trip in car. So, you know, I think, Mr. Mayor, what I would say is that maybe our investment would be better spent in figuring out ways to get less cars driving to campus, acknowledging your comment that there are days where we're not going to eliminate that no matter what we do. But I do think some investment in that would be welcome, and maybe productive in reducing the number of cars ending up looking for spots around campus. So I'm not sure that points anywhere, Mr. Mayor, but that's sort of where I'm at on things right now.
I sure don't disagree with any of that. Other comments? Yeah, Councilmember Somerville.
Thanks, Mayor. I just have a few, listening to the council discussion, I think everything that's been said tonight is reasonable. But the one thing that wasn't really talked about, and I understand the discussion about having permits that are established to houses. I really think that's what we need to do. What we didn't hear discussion about tonight was the technology that's available to help manage that. And I think that's something we should be looking into to tighten those districts down to even a house by house level, issuing a set number of permits per house, and that's it, and working with some new type of electronic permitting. I know there are a lot of options and a lot of vendors out there that we could probably take a look at. I also think that the investments in making it a little easier for alternative transportation is important as well. I am not really a fan of just expanding the districts northward in the size or the scope that they're at. I think they're too large, and I think we're just going to keep perpetuating the same problem. And the last piece that really struck me is the conversation about a revenue stream. I think the city's parking lots are valuable, and I don't know that it's really the city's responsibility to ensure that there's parking for downtown landlords to provide to their tenants. If we were to enter into some type of agreement, I think that needs to be thought about carefully, and how that revenue could be used to enhance and work on some of these issues in the future, and not just given away. I know that like the northern lot on the side of downtown often has empty spots in it, but there are times when it does not, and that parking is being utilized, especially on busy days and downtown events. So I think we need to keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Other input or discussion, feedback? Yes, City Manager.
Mayor, I just wanted to wrap up. If there are other council members that have any other questions, I'm happy to let you guys chime in first.
City Manager, I suppose one thing that might be good to sort of tighten up this discussion a little bit is I understand why we're having it. We've kind of had an uptick, I think, even more so than usual in parking related issues that constituents have raised with us, and you clarified it or reminded the council at the beginning of the meeting why you thought it would be best to go ahead and have this discussion now as opposed to later at the beginning of the next year in case we were going to talk about potential changes. So there was time to prep for that. Is the staff looking for a particular guidance from this work session, or is this more of a revisiting what is unfortunately kind of a perennial topic for the city of Laramie? What can we do now at this point in the discussion before we move forward?
Mayor, on a chicken egg level,
yeah.
My understanding, and perhaps wrongly, was that the council wanted a refresher on the residential parking district program, recommendations from us as to any tweaks that could be made to that ordinance or made to that program in ordinance that you all have authority over to improve it or to modify it, sort of based on our day-to-day experience administering the program and talking to people often. So I guess back to the chicken egg question, we thought the ball was in your court.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Good.
I kind of wanted to give us a little chance to focus up as perhaps we made our last comments before you took us out, city manager. So, council, and I do think some of you have done that. I'll open it to you now, though, again for a round of that. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, yeah. It's not that I just feel like we can do better, and I don't mean to be a pain in the ass about it, but I just feel like, and obviously I have been because the mayor is smiling, but but and so is everybody else. But the bottom line is what we're doing isn't working and hasn't worked. So we've got to come up with some other solutions. It's going to require a little bit more research, potentially a little bit more time. I don't know, but we've been hearing the same things in the same situation time and time again. So I just think we need to buckle down and come up with a different plan, that helps our residents and that, helps the community. Angle parking, one ways, I don't know. I don't have the answer, but there's got to be something better out there. I mean, obviously parking around a university is always a problem no matter where you go, right? But I think we owe it to ourselves to try something and do the research and see if we can come up with a different solution and potentially a revenue stream for us. I mean, I don't know. And I know we have an enforcement problem, but there's got to be something else we can do here.
Vice Mayor, I smile only because I concur and I agree with you completely. I also want to reiterate for the city staff. I think maybe that's the big takeaway is that there's a sense from your council members and I think our residents that our current system just isn't working, and we may need to look at this as tackling this parking problem and trying to come up with maybe some fresh solutions and really look at some possibilities at rebuilding from the ground up. And I know city manager and city staff that's not something we can achieve between now and when we need to do our next round of looking at the residential parking system we currently have in place. I think this is maybe a project that goes out well into next year, maybe takes all of next year to take a look at, talk to the stakeholders and talk to our residents. But I think there really is just a sense that the current framework that we use for this issue just isn't adequate. And I know that certainly doesn't help you, but I think maybe what I'm trying to do is say I think the horizon here is long and maybe requires us using our current system for a little while longer because we don't have any other alternatives, but only doing so to give us some time to really look at some new alternatives or some modifications to see if there might be a better approach. As I say those words out loud, I realize how not helpful they are, but I think just to give this conversation some shape, I think we're talking about a rebuild, not modifying. But perhaps you folks might come to us and say, thank you very much. We think about that all the time. We have no suggestions for you. So we're all ears. I don't know. But I think that's kind of where we're at. We've reached a juncture where it's not very convincing to think that our current system could be modified in a way to meet these challenges. The way I put this, and I've said this to other council members, is I just see the residential parking permit program. What we're going to do with that is just continuously expand it in these concentric circles and make it, you know, a problem for residents that live 4 and 5 and 6 blocks away from the campus. If we continue to stay on this path of that as the solution, that seems to be the most likely outcome to me, as opposed to kind of holistically figuring out, can we really deal with this? Or is parking just going to be hellacious because of the way our town's set up, the University of Wyoming's footprint? I don't know. So lots of exposition there, very little in by way of resolution. City manager.
Mayor and Council, I appreciate this. Let me plant a couple questions with you to ponder, and maybe you know, it's not lost on me that you'll be goal setting again in January, right? As the new year comes, new goals. So I'd like to maybe ask a couple questions out there for you to ponder as we think about what that might look like going forward, and maybe wrap up this conversation more fully in January. But what I've heard tonight is a couple different things. Of course, I've been around this town a long time too. Parking, no matter where it is in Laramie, seems to be a very heartfelt problem. Yeah. And certainly around the campus, those neighborhoods have a lot of pressure. So let me say this, from the standpoint of the folks we work with to administer this program, of every bit of your ordinance, which is many, many tomes deep, this is probably the most beloved. So I feel like I would be derelict of duty if I didn't tell you how beloved this section of ordinance is to these people, the people who live around campus, right? And so where I'm leading to is this question as you think about this. I'm not opposed to recreating things or finding a better way, but I think it's important that we take some time to think about who are the stakeholders, right? Is the stakeholder every resident of Laramie? Or this program clearly was designed with the stakeholders, the people we were trying to solve a problem for, being those people who reside near to the campus. And as you know, shown to you in the PowerPoint just last week, the lady wrote in we got a letter this long with her woes about having 3 young children and having to park 5 blocks away with her groceries and 3 kids in tow, you know. So who is the stakeholder? Is it just any resident of Laramie, or are we, you know, is the stakeholder the people who suffer, so to speak, the proximity to the university and the competition for the parking on their curb line, basically? Then the other thing I would say is, and this is also a perennial Laramie issue, but whose problem is this? Is this the city's problem, or is it the university's problem? And I hear you saying to me and to the other city staff, find a way to solve this. Our powers are not limitless, right? And so I think maybe we should all think a little bit about whose problem is it? And then is it that same party's problem to solve it, or is a collaborative solution demanded if in fact it's a shared problem? And to be fair to the university, I'll offer too, you know, they're right down the street from my office right now. They're building a parking garage. I remember being a legislative intern in like 2001, and somebody, I don't even remember what legislator, said to me, go research what it costs to build a parking garage. And why? Because that legislator had thought, hey, maybe we should put some money in the budget for a parking garage at UW. And here we are 20 plus years later, and finally we're getting a parking garage. So I think there are efforts underway there. I don't know if they'll, you know, bear enough fruit to solve the problem, but just a couple thoughts. Who are our stakeholders? Who are we trying to help? And whose problem is it? Should we take it all on ourselves, or should we not? And the last thing I want to offer is Councilor Somerville mentioned technology, and technology is a really missing part of this conversation, and something that Andy and I have talked about over the years, and could be relevant to the area around the campus, but is absolutely relevant and timely to our downtown. And so I would love to look into parking solutions. We actually had a pilot program that we were going to put in place downtown right when COVID started in March of 2020 with a parking vendor. Long story, I'm not going to go into it, but like lasers and automatic reading technology for license plates. But it fell through because of COVID. We figured that wasn't a good time to gather any sort of data about patronage of downtown businesses, since there were no patrons because everybody was closed. So anyway, technology's huge. I literally get a magazine this thick every month called Parking Today. It has its own magazine. So there's a ton of options. Yeah, there's a ton of options for us. And some of those may also be relevant around the campus in a more residential setting and not a downtown core. So there's opportunity. We'll look at it. And I think this is something you all should contemplate and be thinking toward maybe a goal setting session with the new year coming.
I think that's really good advice. And you know, city manager, you did a better a service there by reminding at least me that we've been pretty critical, I think, of the university this evening, and I think that's justified. But I also think it's justified to say it's not as though they've done nothing. There is a park and ride system. I think it's the view of people in Laramie, students, members of the community, the council, that that's helpful. It's just one that probably needs expansion if we're going to look to that as a solution. I think I've consistently said, you know, having some of that out in West Laramie might be helpful, or perhaps doing a study, investing some time to see where more students might be concentrated and might benefit from a park and ride. Of course, that doesn't mean there would be room for a parking lot and a bus area, but taking a look at that would be useful. But it's not as though they've done nothing. I think the parking garage, frankly, was a heavy lift for them and their efforts with the legislature that took a long time to get into place. And I think it could have some impact. And we want to acknowledge those things. What's expressed here is just a frustration, I think, with the story that we've heard too often, which is there isn't a problem, because of course we hear an opposite narrative from our residents on a constant basis. We don't want to simply say the university has completely abandoned all responsibility. I like your point about a collaborative effort to try to deal with this. I think we've talked about that before. We've taken some steps towards that before, but I think we need to get serious about it. And I think it might be something for council members incoming and remaining to think about that goals list. Thank you, City Manager, for that. I just kind of wanted to speak my piece too. I don't want it to be interpreted that it's, you know, the university's done nothing and, you know, they have 100% responsibility. I think there might be some options. So thank you for that. Council members, anybody else? We got some public comment, I think, waiting there, and a few other things to take care of on the work session. But anything bubble up for you? Okay. Why don't we see about comment on the work session topic? And we'll go there. And we've got Brett Glass. Let's let Mr. Glass into the meeting for comment. Welcome. You have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I've been waiting an hour and a half, have a lot to say, had a lot of comments on the things that you said before. I wish you could see me because if you can see my video, then behind me I would have a picture which shows some history. I don't know if maybe the city clerk has the picture. I did email it to her as well. But as you know, my family has a couple of properties both near campus and downtown. We bought the Wagner building from a former city council member, Seth Carson. And like many buildings downtown, it didn't come with parking. There was no way to buy any. Many of the other buildings likewise don't have any, and they're built to the lot lines. We have tried for years to acquire a single space worth of parking downtown. We have tried to jump on buying properties that were for sale. We have never been successful in getting any parking for that building. It is built to the lot lines. It has zero parking. The tenants rely on the city lots, and for years, actually, the Downtown Laramie Business Association and Laramie Main Street have advertised the downtown lots as places where people could park, and if there wasn't a time limit. Even so, we've lost tenants. Businesses and such as realtors who need to jump in a car and go somewhere quickly, tenants who had a couple of cars have turned down renting in the building, just refused to rent there because there wasn't parking right there. But at least they could park a few blocks away. Well, recently the city has begun to ticket not only vehicles that have been parked a very long time or stored or abandoned, but has begun to ticket our tenants. And they have gone to complain to the city. They've gone and complained to Mr. Fieser, who unfortunately has treated them with great disdain. And some of them have been very upset by the way they were treated by the
Mr.
city.
Glass, I'm not going to listen to criticisms of the staff in this in a direct fashion like that. So you need to.
Well, in any case, okay, I will just say then that they weren't happy with the reception that they got. And the signs which you saw earlier in the presentation, if those signs are put in and if parking is not allowed for more than 24 hours in any of the city lots, it will create a real crisis, and not just for our tenants, but for all of the downtown tenants. Now, Council has expressed an interest in having a vibrant, viable downtown with people living on the second floors. The downtown Development Authority has talked about bringing in up to 300 new downtown residents, and here we are leaving them, virtually all of them, because of the property. I've seen the properties they're interested in developing, with no place to park. This isn't going to work. It's going to drive people away. It's going to harm downtown, and it certainly isn't going to allow for Council's goals to be achieved. And so I would love to go ahead and do a presentation in which I talk about the details of downtown parking. I realize normally you only give 3 minutes. I hope you'll give me a little more, as you did at the beginning of the meeting.
We will.
But I think we really do need a way that someone can park for a few days. If they use the scooters to go to campus or to get around town, if they're using public transportation to get around town, we shouldn't discourage that. I mean, this is very friendly to the environment, and it just creates a good environment downtown if people can do that. But if those signs that you saw in that presentation go up, that just won't be a viable option anymore. We really need to think about this. Now, if one thing that might work is we have areas 1, 2, and 3 right now with residential parking permits. We might want to have an area D for downtown, where it's at least a certain number of downtown tenants could purchase a parking permit that let them park longer in the existing lots. I think we should also have some lots where you can park longer without that. But definitely, you should have some way identifying that as a tenant's car that's there for a couple of days, but isn't abandoned, isn't being stored, isn't being lived in. There is one fellow who had been living downtown in his truck. We obviously don't want to support long-term residency in vehicles like that. There are ways we can do things like that, but we need to work this out so that it's practical for people. And I do recommend that we have longer-term parking at the First and University lot, as was mentioned before, because it's not very active at all. The businesses around it don't rely on it. What we really have is downtown. If I can talk about downtown a little more, we have 3 classes of users of parking downtown. We have the people who come down to shop and participate in activities. Those people should get convenient parking right on the street. And have it be convenient to wherever they're going, because that promotes business downtown. That's just a good thing for the economy of downtown. Second class is workforce parking. We haven't mentioned that or talked about that at all, but the employees of downtown businesses need a place to park, and it shouldn't take up the parking that the customers take up. One of the big concerns with the Hollyhock lot when it was astroturfed, even though there was a park a block away, was that it displaced the workforce parking for people who worked on 2nd Street. This is a big problem. We need to think about it. And finally, again, we need to talk about what happens if we add 300 residents to downtown. Now, I can also talk about UW parking, but if you'd like, I can talk about that separately. But I'm just going to leave council with 2 things. Please do not install signs everywhere saying that there cannot be 24-hour parking. If there's even a snowstorm and you can't move your car, that would be disastrous for people downtown. Second of all, let's take a step back and form a scheme and get residents involved. Let's have a meeting where residents can come in and talk about the possibilities before we act on this. Because if the wrong things happens, again, it will really be disastrous. And I'm not being some sort of greedy landlord. I'm really speaking for my tenants here, because they're willing to work in this sort of a system. And yes, they're willing to create enough of a revenue stream at least to support it. So let's try to make this a win-win. And with that, I'll finish.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. And thank you for waiting and waiting and to participate for that time that you identified, that you have joined us this evening and waited to make your comments. So we did want to give you some extra time. Let's see if there's any further comment. Let's recognize Denise Kreitman. Ms. Kreitman, you've got the floor. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, I am one of the individuals that live north side of the university. And yeah, as UW continues to eliminate parking, it is pushing people further and further north on this side of town. The elimination of parking on 9th Street, they've now taken over 10th and 12th Street, totally tore them out. No parking allowed there anymore. 11th Street is also slated to be removed between Lewis and Bradley. That's well over 100 parking spots removed. The Union's going to close down here, I believe, this next semester. That's another 82 parking spots removed. I've spoken to multiple staff and faculty that say, I'm not paying university fees to park in their lot for me to go to work. And obviously the students don't like to do it either. My understanding of the Union parking is it's going to be very expensive, or not the Union, the parking garage is going to be very expensive to park in. And it's going to be mainly designated for Old Main administration and trustees having their designated spots. We have a permit parking established right now. I feel like it works to some degree, but I really think the enforcement is where it has to happen. If you can't enforce, then it's not going to work, and no matter what system you put in. So I don't know if we need to reinvent the wheel, but Mayor, I did hear you say, you know, if we widen the areas, it is going to continue to push north. It's just going to continue to keep getting bigger. So I don't know if we need, Harney's becoming an issue. You pull up to the stop sign to try and cross Harney now, and it's nonstop cars. So yeah, I don't know what the exact issue or suggestion would be to fix it, but UW has zero mercy. If you park on their campus without a permit and you continuously repeat offend, you're going to be booted or towed. Passing this year, you guys passed, getting corners painted and driveway entrances. Maybe that'll certainly help with the safety issues around this area. But it's not going to fix it all because they still park, in yellow at times. I just encourage all of you to, at some point, either walk or bike. I bike almost everywhere I go in this town. And it's easy to see how many different cars are parked in a permit parking area that don't have permits. And it shouldn't be the residents that have to call constantly to say, they're here again, somebody needs to come out and ticket them. It just would be nice to see some sort of enforcement without constant residents having to be the responsible people to call dispatch and send somebody out. But I do also like whoever suggested Ivinson being one way and putting meters on that. That's a great idea. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for waiting to share your views and talk to us. I know it's not something everybody wants to do with their Wednesday evening, but folks that feel strong enough to stay on to have something to say, we want to hear what you have to say and use those comments to help us decide what we're going to do moving forward. So thank you. Okay. Council members, I don't feel like much has been resolved, but perhaps we've got some resolve to move forward, working on some new ideas. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I just want to comment, like, just going through a campaign season, and people expect the city to solve this problem. I personally don't think that it's the city, like, that we have to provide socialist parking spaces for every resident and for all the university employees and students. But whether we like it or not, becomes our problem, because our citizens expect the city to solve a problem that I feel is created by the university building into the residential, instead of the thousands of square miles of property that they own. So like it or not, it becomes our problem. And I hope I see Dr. Mai here on the listening. I hope we can come to some mutual solution, because, like it or not, it becomes the city's problem. People expect us to fix everything, and I don't know what the solution is. We need much more. We need more transport. I wish we could talk the university into letting us have some of those electric car spots near campus, so that if somebody does have to run out to an appointment, they would have an electric car handy. I just hope we can work together on some solutions, and also with the downtown people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. It'll be no surprise to hear agreement, I think, with that perspective and those points of view too. This discussion isn't going to go away. Our constituents will continue to ask us about it. And I think the University of Wyoming administration can continue to expect us to expect some sort of collaborative effort at trying to resolve this issue that goes beyond a parking garage and the current park and ride. Anybody disagree with those comments on council? No, I don't see that. All right. Council, seeing no further public comment requests, how about we move on to the other housekeeping items on the work session tonight, okay? All right. I want to take a quick look at your, well, why don't we actually go to council comments and updates, please? Seems like it's been a little while since we've had those. Yeah, Councilmember O'Doherty's ready to go.
We had the ribbon cutting over at Firehouse 3 with the fourth graders from Linford, and Assistant City Manager Feeser, and the folks from Creative Energies and our fire department. It was a great time. I have to say, it's probably the most fun ribbon cutting that I have seen. And the students made solar bugs, and we talked about solar energy. And when they took their bugs outside in the sunlight, they vibrated on their hands, and it was very exciting. It was very fun. And so now we have, I guess, an operating, well, when there isn't snow on it, the solar panels there and the charger on the street. So that was exciting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a quick update. Pilot Hill has completed. I know we're headed into winter now, but there are a few, on occasion, nice days to get out for a hike. Trail 1, which is the one on that northern section, sort of 45th and Crow, down low, that is ADA compliant. It's also beautiful for anybody who wants to use it. But Trail 1 is complete and now open. So that's a great little walk. Just a reminder that on that section, dogs are required to be on a leash. And there is the connector trail up on top that connects to the Forest Service trails is now complete as well, which is another, it's a new view. It's cool and worth checking out. So some progress continues on Pilot Hill to expand that trail system. And that's all I have for there. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I wonder, Councilmember Harrington, if there might not be some, is cross-country skiing, snowshoeing going to be allowed up there? I'm thinking some of those areas might be okay for that with a bunch of snow on top of them. Do you know anything about that?
You know, Mr. Mayor, I had that same thought, and previous board chair Tony Hope mentioned that it's windy out there all the time, so you wouldn't want to take your good skis because you are likely to be running into the limestone that takes such good care of our water. So Yeah, you could. I would imagine you could use the trails in that way if you wanted. If we got a good snowstorm, but only for a few days a year, probably.
Your beat up skis. Maybe snowshoeing is the way to go.
Maybe.
All right. Thank you. Maybe I'll see some of you out there as I'm freezing to death, regretting the decision that I've made to snowshoe Pilot Hill. Any other comments and updates? No? Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Maybe just a comment. I thought it was interesting last night in the election. Sales tax passed easily, 77.99 for, 44.93 against. However, the permanent question of the sales tax failed. And so here we're going to be back in 4 years again, asking the residents once again. It was about 1260 difference for and against on the permanent sales tax. And so we're going to be back in another 4 years, but it was nice to see that it passed handily for the next 4.
Might be something worth reading into with those results, Councilmember Gabriel. I too took a look at those. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. A long time ago, probably 10 years ago, we tried to match the Laramie, and it's the bad word to say, gun laws with the state laws. The city here has a unenforceable gun law. And I asked the city attorney, do you think we could take another try at that just to make everything match with the state to here? And he says, I would have to get some more people in support of it. Now, one of the biggest ones is it says right in the city ordinance that no one can carry a concealed weapon unless they were a badged officer, meaning city police, UW police, sheriff's department, game and fish, and that'd be it. Nobody else would be allowed to carry a gun concealed. And when I asked about this, our former police chief, who I really like, he says, don't worry, we don't enforce it anyway. Because I think it'd be pretty funny if we actually knew how many people carried concealed in this town and don't know they're actually violating a law. So I didn't know if there would be anyone else that would want to consider doing anything about that. I'm not asking for anything special. I just want to match the state. That's all. So.
Okay. Council member, I think you can bring an ordinance if you want. I mean, I would work with the city attorney, of course, and then we'd go. We'd go from there. Yeah. I can't second you.
Yeah.
Because of because I can't because I'm the mayor. But yeah. Otherwise we might keep the conversation going. Vice Mayor Pierce. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think Councilor Schuster's comment have some warrant, but I'm wondering if it wouldn't be appropriate when we have our regular council meeting and we talk about future meeting or future work sessions, and as opposed to during a work session under council comments.
Just wanted to bring it up. I just want to see if there's anyone else to support it or if I'm wasting my time. That's all.
Yeah, no, I think we should always match state law no matter what it is. And our city attorney is very good at making sure we are in line with state statutes. So I don't have an issue with it. I'm just wondering if it shouldn't be done on a different night.
Yeah, it's okay. I think as a council comment, I'd like to request that the city attorney get us a little bit of a brief on that for consideration.
I'm not worried about the other stuff, but a lot of people don't know and I think it's hilarious because the Boy Scouts do a competition every year. It's illegal to possess a catapult. And the Boy Scouts have a catapult competition with a beanbag. It isn't like it's a great big thing sitting in your backyard going, hey, look at that. And also, it is against the law to possess a slingshot, which I really think is funny because you can open carry, so somebody could have an AR on their back and their kid next to them has a slingshot, and the child would be arrested, not the person with the AR. So I think there's some stuff out there that needs to go along with state statute. And one of the most comical things is, I don't know if any of you remember this, but probably 15 years ago, there were some kids at the senior high that were ticketed for throwing French fries because there's a projectile law on the books. So having a food fight and throwing a French fry, you actually got a ticket for it if you're in high school. So I've just...
I get it. I get it, Councilmember Schuster. I don't think you're wrong, and I actually don't think you're wrong to bring it up under comments. They sell slingshots at the big box store. Let's put a pin in it for now.
Okay.
I think you bring up some interesting points. I want to get a little bit more of the, what we need to do ordinance-wise to get that to match up, and then go from there.
Okay.
Any other comments?
No, not for me.
Yep. No, I hear you. If I wasn't, well, I'll just do it anyway. I support it. I think we need to take a look at it because I think we're asking for trouble to not do it. Let's see. Any other comments or updates from your committees or anything, folks? Councilmember Cumby, do you have anything from some of the public health stuff? It's been a little while. I hate to put you on the spot, but.
I do not.
Okay.
We have meetings upcoming.
Okay.
And we had a previous meeting of the Disability Board and were unable to proceed with the meeting due to a lack of a quorum. And so we have scheduled a special meeting for the first week in December, and we should have Board of Health at the same time.
Thank you very much. And again, I apologize. My intention wasn't to put you on the spot. It's just that I know you've got a couple of committee assignments there, and it feels like we hadn't had an update. But I understand why now, and we'll look forward to the December.
And one of our topics is, do we need to meet a little more often than once a quarter?
Yeah,
so
certainly.
Okay, but I don't mind you putting me on the spot.
Thank you for your patience with the chair. Let's see. I believe there was some discussion about some alternative transportation projects, but we'll and getting that through the city committee process. But we'll put that aside for now. I think everyone's anxious to go ahead and wrap it up after our parking discussion. Why don't we have a quick look at your agenda, folks, if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already, and then just weigh in on any thoughts you might have. I think your draft agenda is available in your email. Unlike the last couple of regular agenda meetings, there is quite a bit of material on this one. Thank you, City Clerk.
Wrong document. I have too many screens open apparently on my computer here.
I understand.
Simplify it really quick.
We understand. Yeah, thank you for the zoom in too. Small Business Saturday, proclamation, National Apprenticeship Week. Council members, I've been reading a lot of the proclamations lately, and I'm always happy to do that. But remember, if you would like to read one, you're always encouraged to make a request to do that. just as a reminder. I think you all know that. I never mind reading the proclamations, but if it's a topic you have a particular interest in, I always think it's great to let other council members do that as well. I think we're all probably supporters of Laramie small businesses. I know most of you well enough to say that. Councilmember Schuster, National Apprenticeship Week is kind of something that seems like it would be in your alley, but maybe not.
I'd be happy to do it.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Schmeckel, please. I see you.
I'm happy to take whatever one you want me to take.
All right. You can do the small business one next week then.
Great.
Thank you for that. Just seems like it'd been a while since other council members. There for a while, we're kind of in a habit of having other council members move around, and then when we have ones about serious and sad topics, you guys are like, "Yeah, we'll let the mayor do that one." I'm kidding. And again, I don't mind. Any questions on the consent agenda? Anything you want to pull off the consent agenda because you think it needs regular agenda attention? I bet Public Works is happy about that new paint machine. Landfill compactor.
Mayor, this is Councilor Schuster. I would like just to make a mention. I saw the work session on the cemetery operations, staff members. Wreaths Across America is coming up here very quickly this month too, if anybody's interested in that. And that's where they put the wreaths on the veterans' graves. I've always headed that for Wyotech to provide volunteers out there.
Do you want to do an announcement about it at the next meeting?
That'd be great. I would have it complete for you then.
That sounds good. That sounds good, Councilmember Schuster. Or if they have something by way of a proclamation too, that's of course the kind of thing that would be appropriate. Whichever way, an announcement or a proclamation in recognition of the event, I think that's good. That's a good program. City Manager, if you're still with us, and I'm sure you are, is the item number 13 related to the previous item for the chief, or is this a different? I guess it's probably different, but
Mayor, it is different than the item that you saw at your last meeting, and that was a walk-on. This is different, yes.
Okay, I just wondered if it was in connection with, because we needed to have something else done, and I was concerned because the date on that was the 15th that the chief shared with. Okay, thank you. Sorry to call you back in from there.
No, that's okay. Separate grant opportunity that we are pursuing to extend the one-year pilot program you approved this year for EMS paramedics.
Okay.
With a hopefully grant cost share.
Thank you. Yeah, always good to get the cost share. All right. Any other questions about anything coming forward?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
On item number 14 on the Rotary Park, with that item, could we get a review of the agreement for the naming of that park? Because I thought there was some expectation of the Rotary Club funding that park. So it would be good to just to have that information for that item.
Yeah, I'm sure that I think that's a good question. I'm sure that's probably going to be forthcoming as part of the hopefully as part of the staff background, Councilmember Somerville. But it's always good to give them a preview on a question you might ask. I saw the city manager nodding there.
Yep, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, city manager. Yep. All right. Well, moving into the winter and the end of the year and the end of this council term, folks. It's coming up soon. Shall we close the work session and let everybody go on? All right. Good evening. Thank you. Nancy, Oakland Potter, thanks for joining us. It's not often that we have you here. We appreciate your work and your presentation for us. And I think it's likely for you to anticipate being a big part of discussions about the parking program.